Season 4 of Killing Floor 3 just dropped, and I have to be honest with you. The community was convinced the Patriarch was coming back. The voice actor evidence, the timing, the community theories, all of it pointed in that direction. Tripwire had other plans. The new boss in Operation Shadowhunter, the official name for Season 4, is not the Patriarch. It is Dr. Emmanuel Moorcroft himself. And what he has become is something this series has been warning about since the very first video we made about him. This is the full breakdown of everything that dropped today in Season 4, what the Dreadzone actually is, and why it changes everything about what Moorcroft was doing this whole time, what his transformation means for the story, what the oil rig reveals about the mire, and what the Year 2 roadmap tells us about where this franchise is heading next. If you're new to this series and have never watched any previous video, here is everything you need to know. Killing Floor 3 is a co-op horror shooter set in 2091, where a corporation called Horzine Biotech has spent decades secretly producing bioengineered monsters called Zeds. A resistance group called Nightfall, led by Cordelia Clamley, the granddaughter of the man who founded Horzine, has been fighting to stop them. And Dr. Emmanuel Moorcroft, Horzine's chief scientist who believed a substance called the mire represented the next step in human evolution, has been the story's central villain all year. Today, that story reached its most significant moment since the game launched. Let's get into it. The pattern was always there. We talked about it in the unanswered questions video, but it is worth laying it out fully here because Season 4 is the moment it completes. Kevin Clamley, the founder of Horzine, started as a grieving father who believed his research could bring his dead son back. He pushed it past every limit anyone around him recognized. He suffered a psychotic break. He transformed himself into the Patriarch, a massive armored creature, rather than face the consequences of what he had done. Rachel Clamley, his daughter, tried to stop him, followed the same path despite starting from completely different motivations, suffered the same psychotic break, became the matriarch. And then there was Moorcroft, a brilliant scientist who genuinely believed the mire was evolution's missing piece, who surrounded himself with followers willing to commit crimes to protect the research, who the story confirmed was becoming increasingly unstable as a result of what he had been exposing himself to in Antarctica. The pattern was always pointing at the same destination. Today, it arrived. Dr. Emmanuel Moorcroft has merged with his own mire experiments. The official description says he is rippling with muscle and bristling with organic armaments, having become what the game calls the ultimate doomsday weapon. The third person in the franchise's history to believe so completely in what they were doing that they became it, and what he is trying to do before Nightfall stops him is the most significant escalation this franchise has produced across 3 games. The Dreadzone, that is the name of the alternate dimension that Moorcroft's extra-dimensional experiments have been connected to this whole time. The official narrative mission description says Nightfall must stop him from opening an even larger rift into the Dreadzone, one big enough to swallow whole cities and possibly the world. Since Operation Deep Freeze in March 2026, the franchise has been using the word extra-dimensional without fully explaining it. The community speculated. Some thought it was cosmic horror. Some thought it connected to something entirely outside the established science fiction framework of the franchise. It was a door. Moorcroft was not just creating new Zeds. He was not just enhancing the mire. He was working toward a rift between this world and something on the other side called the Dreadzone. And the experiments in Antarctica were not experiments in isolation. They were preparation. Every creature he produced, every follower he recruited, every facility he seized was building toward an opening large enough to do something the franchise has never attempted before in its lore. Not a local outbreak. Not a city-scale disaster like London. Not a continental spread like Killing Floor 2. Something that could swallow whole cities from an alternate dimension. The Killing Floor franchise started with a father in a basement trying to clone his dead son. It is now telling a story about a scientist who merged with his own experiments to open a portal between worlds. That is how far this story has come in 1 year of Killing Floor 3. And honestly, sitting with that for a moment, the scale of what Tripwire has been building toward is genuinely impressive. The oil rig map is the physical location where all of this comes together, and understanding why Moorcroft chose it specifically makes the whole Season 4 story click. A routine oil drilling operation in the North Sea accidentally struck Meyer. That detail, which we discussed when the teasers first dropped, now has its full context. The mire exists in the world naturally, deep enough that an oil drill reaches it before anyone knows what they have found. And the moment Moorcroft learned about it, he seized the rig with his followers, not as a Horzine operation. Personally, he did not seize the rig to study the mire. He seized it because he needed it for the rift. The oil rig is the site of the most dangerous thing Moorcroft has attempted in a year of increasingly dangerous attempts. It sits in the middle of the North Sea, isolated, industrial, completely mire-saturated after the drilling operation made contact. And Nightfall is dropping into it to stop someone who has already transformed himself, and has nothing left to lose. Moorcroft as a boss is a multi-phase encounter that reflects exactly what his character has been building toward all year. In his first phase, he shields himself using a chosen clot, specifically one of the most basic Zeds in the franchise, as a living battery to drain and restore himself. That is an interesting design choice because the clot has always been the symbolic starting point of everything in the franchise's history. It was the first creature ever produced by Horzine's research. Using one as a shield in his final form is Moorcroft connecting himself to the very beginning of the story he is trying to complete. In his second phase, he calls in mire creations and scavengers while retreating to heal. He has ranged weapons, close-range weapons, gas attacks, mortars, grenades, and the ability to shield himself. A boss built from a man who spent a year creating things designed to overwhelm the specialists who would eventually have to face him, which is a genuinely unsettling kind of preparation when you think about it. He is the most complex boss Nightfall has fought, and unlike the Queen Crawler or the Alpha Scavenger, which were creatures produced by his research, Moorcroft is the research itself, in a form that still has a human face underneath everything that has been added to it. The Gunslinger perk returning alongside this specific boss is worth understanding because it is not just fan service, even though fans absolutely wanted it back. The Gunslinger specializes in precision, dual pistols, targeting weak points, a gadget called Fatal Focus that fires homing projectiles at enemy vulnerabilities when aimed correctly, gravity grenades that pull Zeds toward a central point before detonating. Moorcroft is a boss who heals, shields, retreats, and requires different approaches across his phases. He punishes suppression fire and rewards players who can hit specific targets under pressure while managing the chaos he creates around himself. The Gunslinger is precisely the answer to that design problem. The timing is not a coincidence. It was built for this fight. And the 4 new dual pistol weapons, the Law 2058 Bringer's revolvers, the Night Adder select fire pistols, the Desert Eagles, and the AF-2081 double-barrel pistols, give the Gunslinger more options for more situations than the perk has ever had before. One more thing worth discussing before we wrap up, and that is what Season 4 tells us about where this franchise is heading. Tripwire revealed a Year 2 roadmap today alongside the Season 4 launch. Seasonal events are returning. Mod support is coming across all platforms. And there are plans beyond what the Year 1 roadmap contained. If Season 4 closes the Moorcroft arc, what comes next is the question the franchise is now positioned to answer. The Dreadzone exists. Something is on the other side of a rift that a man was willing to merge with his own experiments to reach. That does not stop being true just because Moorcroft was stopped. The Patriarch is still unaccounted for in 2091. Rachel Claimley's fate is still unresolved, and Horzine as an institution is still operating. Moorcroft becoming a boss today ends one chapter of the Killing Floor 3 story. But Looking at everything that was left deliberately open across 4 seasons of content, it feels more like the close of the first act than the end of the story. That is everything Season 4 revealed today, and what it means for the lore this series has been building since the very first video. Subscribe so you do not miss what Year 2 brings. Because the Dreadzone existing as a confirmed alternate dimension changes what the franchise can do next in ways I genuinely have not finished thinking through yet. And drop a comment. Moorcroft was the boss the franchise had been building toward all year. Now that his arc is closing, which unresolved thread do you most want Year 2 to pick up? For me, it comes back to the Patriarch. And after everything Season 4 revealed about the Dreadzone, the question of what 70 years of self-modification plus exposure to something extra-dimensional could produce is more interesting now than it has ever been. Tell me what you think.